reasonable. The purpose of preparing the plan is to develop a realistic strategy to reduce greenhouse gas pollution emissions so that the city can demonstrate compliance with state law AB 32. While there are varying opinions on the necessity of this law and the implications of enforcing it, it's similar to other state mandates that we simply cannot ignore. AB 32 does not require the city to adopt a greenhouse gas or climate action plan per se, but it is incumbent upon the city to be able to demonstrate how it will reduce GHG emissions. Without some type of cohesive plan that's based on the best available information and procedures available to quantify how much greenhouse gas the city emits and how it can be reduced to levels established by law, neither the city nor the state can determine that it is compliant with the law. As outlined in the Planning Commission's staff report, which was included in your packet, actually, I think both of them, from April 23rd, there could be significant consequences should the City Council not adopt a greenhouse gas reduction plan. The primary consequence if the city does not adopt a plan is related to being able to prepare adequate environmental documents that comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. SB 97, which was adopted subsequent to AB 32, added environmental impact questions related to addressing greenhouse gas impacts and policy, GHG policy consistency to what's referred to as an initial study checklist, which is the official state form used when we do our CEQA analysis or environmental analysis on projects. If the city cannot answer these questions adequately, then the city's CEQA documents could be challenged in court. This type of legal challenge could delay proceeding with large-scale projects currently in the process and could invalidate the city's CEQA document. For smaller scale projects, below certain quantified thresholds which were adopted by the Air District last year, they wouldn't be subject to this type of CEQA challenge consequence just mentioned because smaller projects are exempt from in-depth analysis and the same mitigation requirements. The Greenhouse Gas Toolbox includes 36 measures for your consideration. A copy of the toolbox is included in your packet, and I'm also prepared to go through each item that you've got on PowerPoint to discuss with you. Since your council report wasn't, since the commission's meeting hadn't taken place on the 23rd when we needed to prepare the staff report, their recommendations were included in your report you have before you. So I'm going to tell you what their recommendations are in public as well this time. The Planning Commission recommended that the City Council approve the Greenhouse Gas Toolbox with certain changes, which we'll go through on a 3-2 vote with Commissioners Barth and Nash absent. Measures recommended to be excluded from the toolbox include number 4, the Energy Conservation Ordinance. This measure is one that would require energy efficiency retrofits of existing houses at time of sale. Also, number 9, community choice aggregation. This would allow the city to manage the sources of energy supply provided to the city, whereby the city could choose to use different or cleaner types of energy sources. Number 21, which was a correction that was pointed out by Planning Commission Chair Vanderlip. I had it listed as 22, but it's actually number 21, which is public parking pricing. With this one, the intent is to regulate turnover of vehicles parking downtown by charging for parking or parking meters. And number 33, recycling of public events. This one is included in action number 30, so it would double count the emissions reduction.
And they're recommending that those be deleted.
Correct. So, okay. So those were kind of the tough nuts that weren't really, didn't go over well. But even other measures, the Commission suggested modifications, but to include them with modifications, included number 18, which is employer-based transportation demand management. This requires employers with 25 or more employees to provide information to employees on transportation alternatives. The suggestion is to make this a voluntary measure and replace the word ordinance with program. I think we still have the same effectiveness in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The objective is to work with employers to disseminate this information. Number 27 is on construction equipment technologies, or techniques. This requires the use of alternative fuel construction equipment. The Commission recommended changing wording from required to encourage. And next on number 29, water conservation. This one requires exceeding the state mandate for conserving water. They suggested changing the wording from ordinance to target. And then there were a couple other clarifications suggested by Commissioner Vanderlip On number 18, to the correct wording or the wording they would like to suggest is to remove the word require and insert encourage or recommend through a city program. And we mentioned 21, and then he mentioned a couple additional measures where I think there was a little bit of confusion. At the end of the meeting, there was a discussion to come up with a new measure to incentivize local businesses to prevent leakage by allowing residents local shopping and local jobs. It was discussed, but there wasn't an actual formal recommendation included with the motion at the end of the evening. There was also a discussion of adding cogeneration to the new sewer treatment plant. That's actually already part of the sewer treatment plant design, so that's already accommodated. And then also to encourage use of alternative fuels, compressed natural gas and such to other local fleets besides the city's fleet, and that actually is already included in number 22 as well. So those are just a couple clarifications. At the joint workshop meeting in January, the council and commission asked questions about the cost of implementing the measures in the toolbox. The greenhouse gas measures include a rough estimate, a range of costs that the consultants came up with. Staff, we took a more detailed look at that and prepared a spreadsheet, which Councilman Steinbeck has there, the green bar at the top. And that's an estimate where we went through and really more carefully looked at the number of hours it would take for staff and which departments would be responsible for implementing each measure. And we came up with a rough estimate that per year would cost the city in staff hours, which is how we generally measure costs, for soft costs, of about 330 or so hours per year. Hard costs, as we mentioned at the workshop, would be we would seek grants and other means of paying for it other than the city's general fund. So for any physical improvements like retrofitting City Hall with energy systems or things of that nature, we would seek grants to do that. And then other measures such as changing our vehicle fleet to cleaner vehicles, we would do that as a normal course of business as we have been doing the last few years. We didn't see a huge direct cost with that. We anticipate that as the plan is implemented, that will be brought back to the City Council, the Planning Commission and the City Council to reevaluate whether the measures are being effective, if they're being used, and if they're appropriate. We could determine if you want to do that on an annual basis, on a biannual basis, however often it feels appropriate. So we can modify them over time. And there may be some measures you may want to add in the future. Technologies change or new state and federal regulations on fuels, such as which has happened in the last few years. We can modify it and make sure it's being used for the purposes intended for. In conclusion, I'd like to recognize that this is a very complex regulation and complex toolbox and plan that we're looking at. We've tried to distill it down to information that's understandable, and we recognize that we have a lot of questions. A lot of questions. We'll do our best to answer those. We may need to come back another time to answer some of them if we don't have all the information, because it's new to you and it's also new to us. This is a new regulation, and like I said, it's very complex and detailed. Also, a draft of the plan, which would include the measures tonight and an implementation plan, will come to you next fall. If at that time, if there's still questions or some of the measures you kind of thought about some more and you want to modify them, you can take another bite at the apple at that time. So it's not the end all tonight. If what you submit to the consultants as your recommendation to put in the plan isn't, you think it over and want to change it, you can do that. So any other general comments? I'm happy to answer your questions.
Councilman Steinbeck.
Susan, item number 4 that's being deleted was a point of sale item. I didn't see any other point of sale triggers in the other 36
That's
on
correct.
here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Martin.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions and some comments that I'll save till after the public has a chance. You mentioned the potential for changing the toolbox in the future. If we come back at one of these annual or biannual reviews and say, oh, we want to change number 4, 5, and 6 and delete number 2. What type of approval, do we have to send that to the state and say, is this okay, or how do we do that?
No, this is a local document. The state doesn't have review authority over it. So we just bring it back to you.
Okay, and then I believe it's right around line 13, one of the tools is the city would pursue municipally owned renewable energy generation facilities. That sounds ponderous. Is it as ponderous as it sounds?
Perfect.
That's probably, I'm going to take a wild guess and say that the cogeneration at the wastewater treatment plant would be one example.
Okay, we're not talking about setting up a power plant out here.
No.
No, it's
Not
not.
unless
That'll be
technology.
counterproductive. But
Well, you're talking about solar panels, the old landfill, cogenerate out there. Anyway, again, I would like to begin with this by starting the very first and go right down the line, and council has any questions of, let's just say the first three that
I have a question, but you're moving on, so.
on a particular item that's later on, or?
Well, yeah, well, not in general.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, Susan, what I'm most concerned about was the cost of staff time. And what you're saying in the spreadsheet here, essentially that's 331 per year over a 7-year period. Total was 2,300 hours. Did you have a per hour estimate of actual cost, what that is, as an average? I mean, there's different people, different rates, but I mean...
Well, if the planning department charges about, I think presently $146 an hour to applicants, and that covers not only your staff time, but the overhead that goes with it.
Right.
So that's $150 an hour is probably a little on the high side.
Okay. All right. That's what I had. Thank you.
And then again, that includes overhead costs.
Right.
And we do intend absorbing the extra requirements of actions within our existing workload. Which is
Okay, and that, following up, then one more question then. With the projection in the next 7 years, are you expecting that we can do this work without adding staff?
yeah, because we don't really have a choice. We are, at the present time, hiring a intern from Cal Poly who's prepared to work for free. We see that he could do a lot of the kind of easier items of working with us. And then down the road, should things improve in terms of, we have a lot more business in the planning department. We have in the past hired contract planning services to absorb some of the workload, which is then handled through pass-through the developer. We did that on the Regency project out at Lowe's, where we had so much work going on that we couldn't get to everything efficiently and as well as we could. So we hired some consultants to help do the environmental analysis, and that relieved some time for us to keep doing more.
That may be a tool. All right, thank you.
Well, since you opened it up into that portion of it, one of my questions is, again, with the cost, is with the off-road equipment and vehicles, you have 7. That's 7 individual pieces of equipment. What does that entail? Does that entail our generators, our diesel generators and all those for backup?
Oh, that actually is hours, 7 hours.
Oh, hours, okay.
And the
Sorry.
construction equipment would be basically monitoring contractors. When they pick up their permits, they have to document what equipment they're using. And right now they have to meet certain standards for air pollution right now. And so it's just really a little bit of extra time to make sure that they're meeting whatever the standard is for that particular item.
Because I took this totally out of context. I was concerned, in fact, initially when I was talking about cost, it's our city cost to replace equipment. I wanted to know what this is going to entail. What's this going to cost? Dollars and cents, hard cost. I know this other is soft, most of it is soft cost. Soft cost, I understand basically where that's coming from. I want to know the hard cost. That's what I was looking for. And it's obviously it's not here, but you can bring it back. We can come back to
I think we'd be replacing it when it's time to replace it, as opposed to going out and swapping everything out.
Oh, yeah.
Under the normal replacement.
Right, under the normal schedule.
Well,
So you get those costs.
well, again, that's going to be hard to do because the longer you push it out, the more it's going to cost.
Well, mostly what this is all about is paperwork, the way I see it, and staff time. That's what I was all upset about the whole thing. It's just a bunch of Well, documentation, basically, that we're meeting this goal.
Where I'm coming from is I'm concerned about the hard costs, the unintended costs that are being charged or costing us that has to come out of our general fund. That's where I'm coming from. All right? Okay, continuing with this, on the question portion here of the energy, is there any questions by the council?
Well, as long as we're asking general questions, there's a lot of facilitate, support, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And does any of this translate into dollar expenses for us, as the mayor was concerned about? Are we paying for marketing programs and television commercials?
Not directly. There are other partners that we'll be working with in the county and with other cities that already have established outreach programs. We'll kind of tag along with them. Don't see that we'll have a whole lot of extra sort of cost for that.
Okay, council, I'm going to leave some of these because I'm assuming that we don't have questions. So just as a quickly, group numbers 1 through 3, are there any questions or concerns from the council? Okay, so
the only question I have is on number 3, that if we're facilitating through promotion of existing programs, does that constitute a mandate that they must do this, or are we encouraging them to use the existing program?
The idea here would be to encourage to put the word out that these programs exist.
Okay.
through like advertising through Capslow?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward to address items number 1, 2, or 3?
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, staff. My name is Sheila Healy. I live at 219 Via Mesa. And I do have a question, and that actually involves, when you're talking about income qualified, what exactly does that mean? I don't know if staff knows the answer to that exactly. But all of these measures, just in a general comment, are going to be layer upon layer on layer. Everything from your energy to your transportation. We even have a climate action plan for the health department. And so all these are going to be put on top of each other, which I think are going to be very onerous for you, the city, the residents, and the businesses. I do have one thing to mention before you get started, and that is it was a CEQA document that was, I think, attachment 5. The Climate Change California Environmental Quality Act and General Plan Updates, straightforward answers to some frequently asked questions, California Attorney General's Office. And a lead agency rely on policies and measures that simply encourage greenhouse gas efficiency and emission reduction. The answer is no. Mitigation measures must be fully enforceable. Adequate mitigations do not, for example, merely encourage or support carpools, transit options, green building practices, and development in urban centers. And my concern is that we're going to try to be as encouraging and as voluntary as possible, but we're going to find ourselves mandatory and giving ordinances to city and to the residents and businesses of Paso.
Thank you. And do you have any questions on these listed items here, starting with number 1 through 3? Do you have any comments concerning those?
Well, my question earlier and if you answered it, I did miss it, I'm sorry. And that was at a planning commission meeting talking about Capslow, that the city of Paso Robles, would they be in contract with Capslow or other agencies like them if we embrace these measures for the income qualified, energy efficient weatherization and solar programs?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to come forward to address questions, items number 1, 2, or 3?
I'm not sure if what I'm trying to address is pertinent to 1, 2, or 3, or all of the items. Well, I need to state my name.
state your name and address for the record, but I would hope that, you know, if you, at the end, we'll let you address, make your own comments as far as what you...
Okay, these are my own comments.
At the end of this questioning,
Okay.
we want to stick to the questions, the items, 1, 2, or 3. We're going to go down the line just as fast as or as soon as
Well, I'm not sure
necessary.
which you're referring to on 1, 2, or 3.
This page.
I got the wrong page. Okay, but I will give you, my name is Edward Allen Veek. I live in Pascadero, address 5725 Choplin Avenue. What I want to say pertains to all of the issues. You're debating what to do with the greenhouse gas requirements. The greenhouse gas you're being told to control is carbon dioxide. It's also known as CO2. CO2 is what plants require to live. Vegetation needs it to live. No CO2, no vegetation. Plants generate oxygen. Humans breathe oxygen. No plants, no oxygen, no humans. What you're trying to initiate is being pushed down your throat by someone, a group that wants to eliminate property rights, and this is one of the ways that you're going to try to do it. The global cooling ice age hype of the 70s was debunked. Then they had the data and facts to debunk the global warming chicken little thing. In fact, the name global warming was changed to climate change because we are and have been in another global cooling cycle starting in about 1998. You don't hear that in the news, but it's happening. And if you get out there and get some information, you'll find that's true. It's time to stop the march towards total government control of everything. Using CO2 as the chicken littles, the sky is falling. Fearful cry is the latest attempt to control everything. Don't fall for it. Stop this. The emperor has no clothes on. Stop being blackmailed into doing something that is against the property rights of the people of our cities and our country, because I don't want to live in the state that they want us to live in. And then I'll address the other items. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's no one else in the audience to address items 1 through 3. Council doesn't wish, there's nothing there we wish to discuss. We accept as presented. Let's go, let's try a little bit.
Are we going to answer question on number 3, income qualified?
Here, I'll get on that. Capslow has for more than a decade, probably going back to the 90s at least, offered a weatherization program for low-income people. Low income is defined by the state. Generally, it's a family or a household earning 80% or less of the county median income. So what they do is they get grants, and I don't even know if they have federal funds, but I know they could apply for CDBG funds before to fund that program. The CDBG funds have to be used for low-income people. So far, the city has not participated in that program. We have not granted any of our CDBG money to them. However, they have from time to time let us know that the program exists, and they put out some advertising here and there, usually not with us, to let it be known if you're low income, you could apply to them for a weatherization grant.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I mean, within our family, one of our family members was contacted directly by Capslow, was low income qualified, and got weatherization, new refrigerator, new lighting, at no charge whatsoever.
And
As
sometimes,
long as they were able to remove the energy inefficient items.
right, and sometimes the seniors who are on fixed income also find themselves as low income.
Yeah.
In regard to whether the city would be in contract with Capslow, the measure just identifies Capslow as like a typical agency we would partner with. We could work with PG&E, SLO County itself. There's a myriad of programs out there that we just don't have the staff right now to do that. This is something that I feel like our intern would be perfectly suited to do, is to do the research, to find out what's out there, and then work with these folks to get some of their information to give out to the folks who are low income in our community, to encourage them to do this.
For example, we could put something on our website that these programs are available. we do that already for low-income housing. We have pages that if you're low-income, here are the assisted housing projects, here's the number of the managers, it's that kind of thing.
Put info on their water bills.
Right. Okay, continuing on, item number 4 through 6. Do we have any questions about any of the items 4 through 6?
Four was recommended. for
Yes.
deletion. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Just making sure that somebody doesn't want to discuss it.
Well,
Number 4.
I would totally agree with the planning commission that the board should do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would.
Number 6, I do have a question. And the question refers to the to provide incentives and reduce permit fees. That those permit fees are not going to be a. I don't see that helping us with our soft costs, because our staff is being paid, and generally in the building, in the permitting, it comes from our maintaining the staff comes from those permitting fees.
The exact components of how, we can come up with our own program if fee reductions or deferrals is not of interest to the city council. We certainly don't need to include that. We can come up with our own mixed bag of incentives.
Okay, because that's something I'm not really supportive of, because we get criticized constantly for trying to provide incentives for which we reduced our fees, and then we've been criticized. Now we're going to turn around and because of energy, we're going to say it's okay. I just have trouble with that. Councilman.
My concern is any of this mandatory on any member of the public, or is it optional?
Voluntary.
Thank you.
Still. Just, any other questions? Any of those items? Seeing none, okay, now is there, well, obviously there is someone at the podium wants to talk about one of the items, either 4, 5, or 6. Go ahead.
Well, specifically item 4, but the procedure in general. I didn't hear a vote on items 1, 2, or 3. I didn't hear whether those would be included or excluded by the council.
There was no objections to the way they're written, so it's going to be included. It's like taking a straw.
In other words,
we're taking a straw vote.
Tonight, if you remain silent and don't take a vote,
We'll take a straw vote if you feel we're comfortable with that.
a straw vote would accomplish what?
At the end, we'll take a vote, total of
On the entire package?
That's correct. That's the way it's been done. That's the way. Go ahead. Do you have any other questions?
Yes. I am obviously opposed to number 4.
Okay.
Could you name for the record, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you?
Cody Ferguson, 805 Kyler Canyon, Paso Robles. For obvious reasons, point of sale, mandatory remodeling for energy purposes is counterproductive to the real estate market, the construction market, and a lot of markets in which people make their living here in Paso Robles, in and around Paso Robles. So I'm opposed to that one right off the top. And in general, I'd like to know how, when you're considering this, I'd like you to consider how will this bring or encourage business to Paso Robles, given some of the things that are included in here. A previous speaker spoke about the 70s. Of course, there are people who say, well, this didn't happen. I have pictures of the 70s publications on the cover and front page of newspapers and magazines of the country, specifically New York City, with icicles and icebergs. In the late 1800s and all the way up until the late 1930s, almost 1940, we were going to burn up at that time. And then we began a cooling period that lasted through the 70s. This is the weather. It's cyclical. Now, we've attached a political agenda to the warming trend that we're going through at this point in time, although you wouldn't know it by the last couple of days. And I want to know another thing. If the science is found to be unsupported, will these, however many tools in this toolbox that are implemented and made into ordinances, will they be withdrawn? That's a question I have. And I think we need an answer from the city council what their intention would be if that was the case. What greenhouse gases, for example, are of major concern? I noticed throughout these discussions we haven't talked about carbon monoxide, which is a killer. And I'll agree with you. CO2? No. It's essential to life. Carbon monoxide? Absolutely. But I don't hear that talked about. And what is the largest GHG contributor? Does anybody know? It's water. So open water is something that you might want to consider as well.
Okay.
And how are all these measures going to be verified and calculated? Now, I learned something listening to the discussions from the Planning Commission that you're going to count tailpipes. That's what I was told. I don't know how scientific that is. Is there any scientific way to measure our progress with all of the tools that you're going to put in this toolbox? I hope so. I hope that somebody is serious enough about what they're doing here that's going to stifle some activities in this city as we know them. That they have some insistence that there's some scientific measurement of the greenhouse gases that we're trying to eliminate. And how many of them have we eliminated? So I'd like you to consider the things that I've mentioned. And I would certainly like to see these items 1, 2, 3, and I'd like to hear you include them and exclude them. So if you're going to take one vote at the end, we at least know what you're going to be voting.
Sure.
Thank you.
Fine. Okay, no one else will come.
Hi, Council. My name is Randall Jordan, 902 21st Street. I'm a local builder. I've been here for 30 years. I've seen a lot of changes in this city. One thing I'd like to back up a little to, I was offended by Councilman Strong by saying that low-income family got winterization and weather stripping free of charge. We paid for it. We all paid for that winterization.
Please.
Okay. This is not a mandatory toolbox you have to do, and that was said very quickly at the beginning of this. This is not mandatory. If I understand, I think that we're already at the levels that we need to be for the first threshold. I think we're there, except we're now implementing this. It doesn't behoove you to implement this. It does not. This is a very slippery slope. Okay, I want to talk about, you're taking one at a time.
Yeah.
Let's see, number 5, provide incentives, priority permitting, reduce permit fees for new development or major remodels. This is exactly part of Agenda 21, private-public partnerships. So the city is basically going to grant, and they've already done it with certain contractors in this town, giving them special incentives, special fees, special things over other contractors. And that is part of the incrementalism that is basically taking over, and it's going to take over, and the government will be running everything. You guys will be making a decision for everything. I know a lot of you up here, that is not your forte. You're not into grants, you're not into freebies. You guys pay your own way, except all I hear today is grants, where we can get more money on grants. That's all I have to say on those items.
Okay, so you don't support number 5?
I don't support any of this.
Okay. Thank you for being brief. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is John Texera. I live at 2495 Starling Drive here in Paso Robles. And you know, the problem I have with this is negotiations on cap and trade and the carbon tax broke down in the United States Senate in April of 2010. The federal government decided that they wouldn't go with this greenhouse gas issue or cap and trade, and the reason was because credible information revealed that the idea of global warming was based on junk science and that it was faulty and phony, right? And, you know, I attended many of the public hearing meetings here, you know, when they occurred. Public comment was stifled. It was not, you know, we didn't have a chance, we didn't have an opportunity to say what we needed to say. We didn't have a communication. Communication is a two-way street. You say something, we make a decision, and you know, we get a response and we work it out from there. I too am concerned, everything we have to say tonight is grants. This is grant, you know, was it a federal grant that paid the salaries of these folks to put this big plan together? The state is broke, what is it? How many million or billion is the state broke? The country is you know, we have, what, 17 trillion in debt. It just goes on and on and on. You people were put here by the public to make decisions. And you need to make decisions on the basis of good common sense and quit following the direction that you're given. The issue is, it comes down the pipe and you just rubber stamp it and keep going. The costs here are going to kill the economy of the town and the economy of the city. And you're part of it. And I'd like to know, I'd like some answers in terms of where these grants come from, how much the grants are going to cost. We talked about 300 hours at $150 an hour. With all this fancy stuff, I think we can multiply. Do we anybody have a calculator that can lay it out so we know the end dollars and cents, what we're talking about here, percentage? How many million dollars, a trillion? I think I'd like some answers to that.
You won't get that answer tonight, but you could probably might get it later tomorrow or Sunday, within a week, as far as calculations are concerned.
Kathy Arnett, 3¾ Horse Lane. One of the things that I found disturbing was after the Planning Commission meeting, and I think Susan also alluded to this at the beginning of this meeting, was that we did not have the numbers exactly of what had been adopted by the Planning Commission and what hadn't. That should have been presented tonight as a public document in the back.
Yeah, it was.
It was gone. Well, I lumped in zillion documents, and I took notes through the Planning Commission meetings and attended both of them. And no, Cody, we're not counting tailpipes. If you've been there, you've never heard that. But one of the things, regardless of what we choose or whatever, my understanding is that it has to be measurable. It has to be enforceable. And when you start telling me that we're going to encourage and words like that, that may be politically correct, but they're not measurable. I would rather have a solid program, maybe it's less. We're told at the beginning that we don't have to do this program, but yes, we do have to do this program. I understand why we're doing this program, but it still has to be measurable. And by all the notes that I took in the Planning Commission, getting finished with this all, it's not all measurable. The one thing, though, that I want clarification on, and that was number 4, was that included from the Planning Commission? Because my notes said that the program was going to be voluntary. Was that your understanding, Susan?
Yes.
Okay, because the way that it was written, it said it wasn't selected, and then out in the comment part, I put, it makes the program voluntary. I have a question then.
Can you give me the title, because maybe we're not clear on which item.
Number 4.
The number 4, energy conservation ordinance.
Planning Commission recommended against it.
Right.
Cross.
You're saying that the Planning Commission did not choose that, correct?
Right.
Why? Why the hullabaloo then?
Good question.
I mean, I wrote down in the margin was to make the program voluntary, and so that's what leads me to think I don't have absolute fact information of which ones we chose and which ones we didn't.
Well,
because we're making a lot of these things voluntary.
excuse me, but one thing on item number 4, it's a recommendation by the Planning Commission still the final decision lies here amongst us five. So we take their recommendation seriously, but still, I don't know what my colleagues are thinking until we discuss it.
When you discuss it, we also discuss how we're going to measure it. The same with all these other ones. We facilitate, we collaborate, we expand, this sort of thing.
Okay.
Those words just mean something else to me. I would rather we do less to start out with and expand the program, because you know damn well that this is only the beginning. California changes its laws. There's no doubt in my head that this is just the beginning. So, thank you.
Thank you.
On number 6, talking about the energy efficient public realm lighting requirements. At the planning commission, I asked the question on who owned the lights. Was it PG&E or was it the city? And then we have a 5-year, I guess, buyback program that the city's buying back the lights. And so my question on that is, have we bought back all the lights, or are some still owned by PG&E and they wouldn't be, we wouldn't have influence to have them using the efficient lighting, talking about LEDs or anything else on the new development?
Okay. Your staff wanted to answer those questions referring to items 4 through 6.
Yeah, I thought we answered the planning commission. As of 3 or 4 years ago, PG&E now owns all lights. I say all lights from this point forward. There are several in the city that are owned by the city. And the ones that are owned by the city, we would be looking to, as the bulbs burn out, put in new ones, for which PG&E gave a grant for this particular plan. That's where it came from. That was the question somebody else had. So PG&E, I'm assuming, would be following their own advice and putting in the more energy efficient ones.
Hopefully that answers that question.
Do you want me to address the other questions?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of if the science turns out to be a hoax and would we withdraw this plan, that's to be determined later. I can't answer that particularly. What greenhouse gases are of a concern? All of them. And actually our objective really is focused on reducing what's being emitted by the city. How do you verify or calculate or measure progress? And that will capture some of the last questions too by Kathy and Sheila. In each measure are assumptions. And so we'll be able to, we'll need to develop a tracking program and monitor it. There's assumptions of how many rooftops have new solar panels, how many city facilities have been retrofitted, how many vehicles the city has have been turned over to different energy efficient vehicles and so forth. So we'll do our own tracking and see if, on the number of the number of street lights, we estimated, I want to say 900 new street lights in the next 7 years. That's if all the specific plans are approved and are going forward. We've calculated the length of the streets that would be included, how many lights and so forth. We'll be able to measure how many lights and the type of light fixture and the energy required and the resulting GHG from that is. And so that's how we will track and how we'll measure our progress. We did get a grant for this. It actually included some grant funds from Southern California Gas Company and also from APCD. I think that's about it. Real questions? Most of them are comments.
If there was anyone in the audience feels that their question wasn't answered, come back up and address it. Well, you didn't ask the question. But if you have one, come on up, go ahead and ask the question. If it has to do with items 4 through 6, please.
It has to do with what she just said.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's great.
Oh, I didn't have it.
I was very happy. And my question is, what you said about aging, I understand, and what Chuck's point was, is that you're assuming for each household.
I can't hear you, Sherry.
You're assuming
I can't hear
each
you.
household a measurement. But those measurements, there's never going to be a measurement in the air of greenhouse gas. Is that correct?
No. the city's role and authority isn't to be out there measuring what's floating around in the air. That's the air district at the state. Our role is to develop a plan to reduce emissions. The way we can calculate how much is being reduced is, we back up a little bit, the assumptions, some of the other assumptions in this, which are included in the model that projects how much will be emitted over time and how much will be reduced, take into consideration information that we gain from all the energy bills of all buildings in the city, all vehicles in the city that are registered through DMV. All this data has been collected and calculated to determine how much energy is used and how much, from the energy used in the particular sources, how much GHG is emitted from that. And so we can kind of backtrack with the modeling program to determine how much is being reduced through this plan.
Yeah, my problem is that we're going to be passing policy, and the whole issue is to reduce greenhouse gas, which most of us who have been educated on it know it's not necessary. That's the whole point of this. But we're never going to measure in the air the actual tonnage of greenhouse gas to see if all your assumptions and all these policies are, quote, working. As you said, if over a 7-year period you're not working, we're going to be implementing more and stronger issues. We're never going to measure the results. We're never going to know an actual metric tons of greenhouse gas because it's probably not possible.
The model, calculate the tonnage.
And I'm very concerned also about the hard costs again. Why can't we talk in number of dollars? I have here from the Andrew Chain company. They've done an assessment on the impacts of AB 32. We're very concerned about the economy of Paso Robles with business and what this impact is going to be. Maybe some of you have this. The impact on a family is $2,500 per year, an annual earnings loss of $900 or more, and a jobs lost of $262,000 statewide. So this is going to have an impact on the city, and it's going to be a real deterrent for business and the economy. So all I'm asking, I know you must do something. I'm asking to please make it voluntary, make it educational. Even this is going to be a cost for the citizens. But thank you, Planning Commission, for eliminating the requirements of the ordinances. That is something we do not want. Yes, incentives mandates or something, but if we can't measure something, don't make it mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you.
You asked if all the questions were answered. You have an item 4, 5, and 6. Item 4 was recommended to be taken out of the toolbox by the Planning Commission. How are we to know that if there isn't a consensus at this point in time?
As soon as I conclude and get all the response from the ayes, and come back to the council, and you will find what the consensus is of each of the items. Okay? Okay. Does anyone else wish to come forward? Seeing none, bring it back to the council, and we can discuss items 4, 5, and 6. Is there any concerns? I do have on 5.
I agree with 4 being eliminated, like the Planning Commission indicated.
Okay.
And when you say eliminated, you mean making it a program, not an ordinance? Or
No,
Taking it out entirely.
it's supposed to be excluded.
That's the recommendation to exclude.
Right.
If you're doing straw votes now, I agree with that.
Okay. And again, I'm having trouble with this number 5, so that's just my personal opinion. But the consensus is, from my colleagues, appears to be they support number 5.
Well,
as
if I may, we're getting kind of confused here. If we're not going to wait till the end of the entire list to make a decision, you want to make decisions 3 at a time.
we're doing a straw vote, so that
Okay, well, one of the things that I support you on, I agree with, is I think everywhere it says here we're going to do fee deferrals or permanent reductions, that should be taken out. Granted that it's our flexibility, it's not mandated, but as long as that language is in there, the likelihood it's going to happen is increased.
Thank you.
That number 5 is...
Yes. We need that. That's my concern.
I have a question. Are you saying just take out everything in the parentheses and just leave it generally, provide incentives without defining them?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I interpret you.
All right.
Okay.
clarity. Mr. Mayor, I have a question too.
Go ahead.
Susan, when you're saying assumptions, are these, where do we get these assumptions from? Is there already a matrix from somewhere that we're basing this on?
A lot of the metrics on emissions, production from energy use, so things of that nature come from, it's already used an acronym, CAPCOA. It's a subgroup of the Air District that study these. And so a lot of the metrics which are documented in each measure, the assumptions are documented from what source they're taken from. Some are like from the building.
Well, the answer to the question is you're not just making these assumptions, pulling anything out of the air. You've got a basis.
No. The other types of assumptions in here have to do with how much we think we can achieve, which then result in how much emissions will be reduced. So, for instance, on rooftops, or excuse me, casually, there's a measure in here to encourage installation of solar panel rooftops or alternative energy. We estimated 100 a year. And so over 7 years, we estimated 700 rooftops would be changed, or homes would be changed out. If we're seeing in a couple of years that we're not hitting those numbers, maybe we should adjust that assumption and it will recalculate the emissions reduction in the model.
How did you arrive at a baseline? Is it this year, or a given year, or is it a criteria?
Over 7 years, how many homes do we think we could retrofit with?
So we're going back 7 years from today.
No,
for a baseline. Where's your baseline?
We're thinking that that's the number of homes we think that we could encourage to do that.
So you're starting with 0. There are none now?
Right, we're starting with going forward because the amount of emissions that are created right now are starting at what's existing now. So any homes that already have solar panels, those are already calculated into the existing baseline inventory.
That's the baseline I'm talking about.
Okay.
Now, where does that baseline come from? What is it? Not going forward, where are we starting from?
Right. The consultants that prepared that, we culled every power bill in the city. We have information from DMV on their vehicles. We inventoried the number of streetlights and signals, and inventoried how much energy each home, for instance, uses. And then that's calculated into how much emissions result from that. So we looked at what actually is being emitted in the 5,600 homes that are existing.
Okay, that's based upon some professional organizations' calculations or formulas.
That's based on actual data.
Well, I know.
I thought you meant...
But if you're saying they're using this much energy, and therefore they are producing this much emissions, there had to be somebody come up with a calculation.
CAPCOA.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Stein.
On number 5, what's the exact wording that was
Well,
proposed?
I was going to get that clear. I want to make sure that the staff understands what the intent was on that, on number 5. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, staff, would you please, because it was, as I interpreted from Councilman Martin, we're suggesting that we eliminate the in parentheses information, and that's it.
Correct.
Okay.
Everything in the parentheses, and if this goes forward,
Right.
we would work with you to develop whatever's
Right.
appropriate.
Exactly.